Leeds, Leeds, Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Working Hours, an oral history podcast about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours wants to record 1,000 loiners over the course of this, the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. My mission here is to try to map out what my city, Leeds, a city that has declared a climate emergency, did during humanity's biggest emergency. On Working Hours, we hear how loiners have, are, and will be coping with our multiple and expanding crises during their day-to-day working hours. Can we turn things around? We'll find out. To tell this story, I need loiners like you, dear listener. I need people in Leeds or people from Leeds to come on this podcast and just tell me what they do all day and let me record how this affects us. Thank you for listening. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I think when I grew up, it kind of changed. I wanted to be an actor, first of all. And then I discovered heavy metal when I discovered Guns N' Roses when I was about 14 or 15.
Yeah.
And thought, no, I want to do that. That is definitely what I want to do. So that was me sorted for a long time. And I never considered the fact that I'm a terrible musician. But I had great hair. And I thought, but it didn't. But that was sort of what I wanted to be when I was younger. There was always something creative.
So how long did you hold on to the rock star fantasy, I suppose?
I think I played in bands for about 10 years, and none of them were really any good, apart from the very last one, which I was in with a close friend, and I kind of realised in the end I was never going to be able to keep up, which kind of sucked all the fun out of it.
You're listening to Series 4, Episode 25, and to my guest, R.J. Barker. This is another Squadcast interview recorded on the 5th of September 2023. R.J. Barker is a critically acclaimed and award-winning author of fantasy fiction. He won the 2020 British Fantasy Society, that's BFS, Robert Holstock Award for Best Novel for his fourth novel, The Bone Ships. His debut trilogy, The Wounded Kingdom, which includes Age of Assassins, Blood of Assassins, and King of Assassins, was nominated for the David Gemmell Award, the Kitschki Golden Tentacle, the Compton Crook, and the BFS Best Debut and Best Novel Awards. It was called Thoroughly Entertaining and Constantly Impressive by Fantasy Hive, and one of the best fantasy series you will ever read by the BFS, and a singular, sensational new voice in epic fantasy by Kings of the Wild author Nicholas Eames. RJ followed this with the award-winning Tide Child trilogy. Books include The Bone Ships, Call of the Bone Ships, and The Bone Ships Wake. These books have been hailed as one of the most interesting and original fantasy worlds I've ever seen by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and Brilliant by Robin Hobb, alongside rave reviews in Starbust, SFX, and a starred review in Booklist, which said it was a unique and memorable world, harsh and brutal and full of fully realised, powerful female characters. Barker has managed to craft a story inspired by Moby Dick, Game of Thrones, and pirate lore, and readers will be drawn in and fascinated. RJ lives in Leeds with his family and a collection of questionable taxidermy, odd art, scary music, and more books than they have room for. He grew up reading whatever he could get his hands on, and he has always been that one with the book in his pocket. Having played in rock bands before deciding he was a rubbish musician, RJ returned to his first love, fiction. Right, let's do this. Episode 105 of Working Hours with R.J. Barker. So what is it that you are doing now then?
Well, when I gave up music, I was just thinking, well, because I needed to do something creative. That's how my mind works. I'm fascinated by it. And I didn't want to be an actor because that was a lot of hard work. And I'm not into hard work. And the other thing that I'd always had with me is I'd always had a book in my pocket, always. And I thought, right, I'm going to be a writer. Surely that's easier than being an actor, which is not. It was a mistake. And if I'd known then how long it would take, I might not have done it. But I didn't. And I decided that's what I was going to do. So I kind of committed to it and wrote and I wrote and I wrote because I decided I was going to be a rock star. Didn't really finish school. I got a bit bored of it and just decided I'd stop going. I always hope my mum and dad never listen to these podcasts. I don't think they still know. So I had to reteach myself, in essence, how to use the English language, which is why I'm what people refer to as quite a voicey writer, which means I very much have my own style. But yeah, it eventually, touch wood, worked out for me. So that's good.
So take us through kind of your journey into writing then. Like, did you start with articles or copy, or did you just go straight into writing, huge manuscripts? How did you get into it?
I started with short stories. I have no interest in writing anything factual. That's not my thing. I wanted to make stuff up and create things out of my own imagination. So I wrote short stories for a long time. The entire thing was 13 years. 13 years it took me. And short stories were a nice way of learning how to do things, but a terrible way of earning money. In the entire 13 years before I finally got anywhere, I earned a total of $5 through writing short stories.
Wow.
And then eventually I kept going and I kept going. I thought, right, I've got to have a go at writing a novel because that's the only way you're ever going to get anywhere. And I wrote sort of 2 or 3, and I was quite lucky because this sounds quite backwards, but it's what I think. I got very ill. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I weighed about 6 stone. I was really poorly, and I just became too poorly to hold down like a normal job, which was quite good, really, because holding down a normal job and trying to write a book is really hard. So I had a lot of time on my hands. We had a son about that time, and I thought, right, well, I'm going to properly commit to novels now, and I did. And I wrote, I think, 3 novels, and then my way of getting into writing is absolutely no help to anyone who wants to do it because it was such an odd. Everything in my life has happened as like a cascade of odd coincidences or things that don't make sense, and suddenly I end up where I want to be. I wrote a short story and I put it on my blog, and an editor from one of the big publishers saw it and said, "This is too good to be on your blog when no one's going to see it," which is a lovely backhanded compliment, I suppose. And he said, "Can we put it on our blog?" And I said, "Yeah, you knock yourself out." And then he asked me if I had anything he could read, and I sent him something, and he hated it. But he did say, "It's not for me, but I've got an author friend who I think might like it." And they sent it to him. He sent it to his agent. And his agent came back and said, "I also hate this, but I do think you've got talent. Have you got anything else?" And I'd written quite a long science fiction novel at this point. And I sent him that, and he read that and came back and said, "Right, first third of it is brilliant, and the rest is terrible. We have to rewrite it." So I signed with him, because that's what you want to hear. You get very used to criticism as being a writer. It's intrinsic to it, and people saying no, it's a big part of the job. And we reworked this novel and we submitted it to all the publishers, and everybody said no to it, which was a bit sad. They were very complimentary about it, but the feeling was it was just a bit too odd. Though it was nice, and it wasn't quite what they were looking for at the time. And there's quite a lot of luck involved in submitting the right thing at the right time to publishers. And then me and my agent parted ways for really boring reasons. He was downsizing, and the way he was doing it was by losing all the writers that didn't have deals because they were earning him money. And I made a list of other agents I was going to try, and I passed it to him and said, "Do you know these people? Are they worth going?" And he added another agent on the end, and he said, "You should try this bloke called Ed Wilson, who's on Twitter. He's called Literary Whore." And I'd seen him, but I'd never thought of sending anything to him because I'm not a literary writer. I'm a genre writer. I like science fiction and fantasy and crime and all those things. But my old agent Rob just said, "No, you really should try him. I think you'll get on with him." So I sent this book that I just finished, which was a sort of fantasy murder mystery, to Ed and all these other agents. But Ed was back in touch with me within a week, and he just rang me back and said, "Yeah, you've got something here. I can sell this. Do you want to become one of my clients?" And said yes, because you don't get offers of representation that often. I jumped on it. And he submitted it, and he sold it to Orbit, who are one of the biggest self-publishers of that genre. And it did pretty well, and we had a 3-book deal from that, so we released those. And the only thing they said was, can you write one every 6 months, which is quite fast for a novel. But just as I'd started this book, which would eventually go on to be called Age of Assassins, which was not my title, but publishing is a very odd industry. I'd been given a course of steroids, so I'd written this book in 6 weeks, frantically on these steroids. I'd just go, I could write an entire book. So when they said, can you do a book every 6 months? I was like, yeah, not easy, I can do that. But I did have to come off the steroids, but I still did it, and I really enjoyed the process. And then we released my next trilogy of books, which were called the Tide Child books, and they're like fantasy ship book. I love Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey Mature, the film Master and Commander.
Yeah.
The book that film's based on. I love those books, and it's like a fantasy version of that. And that won the British Fantasy Society's best novel, so that was quite nice.
Yeah.
And I got really good reviews. And then my latest book, Gods of the Weirdwood, has just come out in June, and that's had quite startling reviews. It got a 5-star review from the Daily Mail, which is personally quite conflicting for me. I mean, I like the 5-star review, but I don't like it being in the Daily Mail. But anyway, so it's going all right, and that's how I got to where I am. That's a very truncated version, which leaves out all the hard bits.
Well, so how long did you keep up the book every 6 months for then? Did you go on to keep that up, or?
I'm quite a speedy writer compared to a lot of writers, and partly because I do it for a living. It's all I do. I don't have another job. A lot of writers have to have another job to do it, but I do have, and what I write is quite accurate in that it doesn't actually change a massive amount between what I've written and what comes back from the editor later on, which is helpful. I don't do it in 6 months. It's about 9 months for a big fantasy book now. But I write books in between because I like to be distracted. And sometimes I can write those in like 3 or 4 weeks, depending on how into it I am. Anything that I'm not meant to be doing is far more attractive than the things I should be doing. And I'm much more excited about. So I'll like bang them out. So I've got all the stuff I'm contracted for. And then there's like 2 or 3 books with my agent that we're messing about with and deciding what we shall do with these. Some he likes, some he doesn't, but he's wrong.
Is it always different to the ones you like?
We like things for very different reasons. He's an agent, and he likes things for commercial reasons. So he likes things that he knows he can sell. I wrote a murder mystery which I really like, and he doesn't, because it's not really a murder mystery. It's people sitting around in a B&B drinking tea, which I really enjoy writing. And he'll sit there going, people don't want to read this, so they'll be bored. I'm like, no, but they might. But he tends to know his stuff, so I'll put things to one side and come back to them again at another day and go through them again. I trust him, and we get on really. He's a friend now, which is lovely, and I know he makes really good decisions for me when I am not the sort of person who makes good business decisions. You wouldn't put me in charge of your business. I'd break it. I'm just not attentive. I'm not that sort of person. I'm creative and a bit flaky, and I can write a really good book. But everything else, I'm just like, oh, no, don't. My wife keeps my diary because I just cannot be trusted. She's like, you're doing something. I was going, no. Do you know you're in London tomorrow? No, I don't. But I do now. But
So is your life managed by, like, phone notifications whenever you have to do anything? If you have to go anywhere, it's
phone notifications and doing things the minute I get them. So if somebody gets in touch with me and says, there's this thing in London we want you to do, I'll book the train and the hotel then at that moment, because otherwise I'd forget, and somebody would tell me, but this is unfortunate, we're going to get to London. Or the bigger stuff for my publisher, they do it. I've got a publicity officer called Nazia, who's terrifying, and organizes me. I just get messages saying, you're doing this thing on this date. Don't forget. Okay. I'm too scared of her to forget, so that works quite well.
Nice. So I won't I'll dive straight into the other questions because I think we'll draw more stuff out as we go along.
Yeah.
So rather than kind of delving in a bit more here. So I will kick off with the COVID question. So thinking about going into lockdown, I want you to think about sort of your workload at that time and like how did it increase or did it drop off? What was that kind of like? How did that experience then have any sort of effects on your work going forward? Are there any changes that came out of COVID to the way you're working now, or is it all back to normal?
It didn't really change for COVID because I mean, essentially, I sit on my couch and write a novel. That's my job. So the only thing that changed for COVID is my partner. She couldn't go into her job anymore, so she had to work from home. So I couldn't actually decide to play video games instead of writing as much because she would look at me.
You spend a lot of time not writing.
Yeah, I do. I spend a huge amount of time not writing. And any writer you speak to, we do. It's an important part of the process. Not writing.
Yeah, it's thinking time, processing time.
Yeah.
And you've got to like some of that subconscious processing, isn't it? You've got to leave the thing alone, and stuff's going on with it in the back of your head, I'm sure. And because then you come back to it like, now I've got new ideas.
Yeah, so I'm consuming other media. Like I always have music or the television on, or I'm reading a book or something is going on. So yeah, but and I said before we started this, I've not got the camera on because I'm in our bedroom, which is also my wife's office. And we have very different ways of working in that I like everything to be out of the way when I'm working, and she likes everything to be on her desk, just everything in the world. Yeah. So so we're quite different, but it's quite fun. In the morning, she'll just be right, I'm going to work now. I'll say, okay, bye, and then I'll see her at 4 or 5 when she comes back into the front room, and I've been writing all day, and she's like, no, you haven't. So, no, I haven't. But I've done a bit. I've done something. So yeah, that's the only real changes. Yeah, is my other half is at home, which I like. I like having because we like each other. So it's quite nice, really. COVID wasn't. It didn't really affect me at all, apart from the fact that I didn't see people as much. That's the only thing. A lot of your life as a writer is online anyway. So it's all email. My editors are in London. I'm here in Leeds. So no massive change for COVID, really.
I suppose events would have dropped off or would have gone online. Did it affect sales at all? I suppose Amazon's still there delivering by post and other...
Weirdly, book sales went up during COVID. For as far as I'm aware, given that I don't work in marketing.
Makes sense. People had lots of time on their hands.
They went up for existing authors, but it was an absolute nightmare for people who were debut authors who had a book coming out during COVID because they couldn't do any of the things that people usually do, go to bookshops or any of the events that weren't on. But I did actually do quite a lot of events and that via Zoom, and I ended up doing things that in the US, which I don't really have as much of a name over in America as in the UK. So that was quite nice. So for some reason, anything on Zoom I find really tiring. It's really hard. I don't know why. I find it much more tiring doing it in person, which I like. On Zoom, I'm a bit less of a fan of it.
Yeah, I think it's to do with the frame rate, because your eyes fill in a lot of the information. So your brain has to work harder watching the other person. Yeah,
and there's not quite as much of a feeling of bouncing off people that you get when you're doing things in person, which I like people.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons I'm a writer, is that you have to like people to do it. So, so yeah, that's really the only way COVID affected me. I was quite lucky like that.
So I'll do the kind of work-life balance thing, then, because that, that kind of comes up around that question quite often. But so are you quite good? I mean, obviously you're working at home. Do you have like a designated space? Are you quite good at separating work and home? Does work finish when, the other half comes home? Like, how do you keep a good boundary, and how do you manage that?
I don't know if I do keep a good boundary, because it's that weird thing that when your hobby becomes your job and you're doing something that you really love, you don't really like when I have hours that I do, like in the morning I will write until I've written 1,000 words. That's generally the minimum that I write. But sometimes, like today, I'm doing an Ask Me Anything on Reddit, so I'm on the computer all the time answering questions on that. And that'll go on all day, so I'll be on and off, and I can't really concentrate on anything else while I'm doing that. And if I hit something, if suddenly I work something out and it feels right, then I just won't stop. Like I had an idea for a book that it just all clicked into place in my head, and there was definitely 4 weeks where I didn't do anything but write that book. And my wife and my son may as well not have been there, but they're quite used to that. And then, but a lot of the time I'm really not doing much at all. It's a funny thing. It's just people. I hate saying the muse because it sounds so pretentious. But when it hits, I won't stop. And when I'm doing other things like edits, which are less, the actual creative writing part of it is quite tiring. But edits are less so, and I tend to just sit and do them. And sometimes I won't stop until 7 or 8 o'clock at night, depending on how I'm feeling. So there is that. I don't think there's really much work-life balance, but at the same time, I really enjoy what I do, and it feels like fun doing it. There's a real joy in writing for me, so I don't feel any danger of burning out at the moment, touch wood.
But you're not too regimented with it either, are you? Because, as you've said, you might be taking some downtime to think or to do something else.
Yeah, no, I'm not a regimented person at all. I make myself write in the morning because I'm better in the morning, and I know that. And then once I've done those 1,000 words, I might do some more, or I might read, or I might play video games, or I might get roped into doing DIY, which happens a distressingly amount of the time. And why do you want me doing DIY? I'm terrible, honestly. It's just like, sometimes my half will go, right, I've measured up, but you go drill holes. And I can do that. That's fine. But I'm not measuring up again because there have been quite a few wonky shelves. And my other half's a designer, so that doesn't go down well. So I've got to, okay. So there is that. But yeah, I'm not regimented. I never feel like I'm working too hard, which is good, because I think I spent the entirety of my life when I wasn't a writer desperately trying to find ways not to work too hard in every job that I've ever done that I've hated, every single one of them. But I love doing this.
So you mentioned the Crohn's earlier. When did you get diagnosed, before or after you started writing?
Before.
Well,
no, I was writing. But before
you kind of took it full time, and
before I was doing it professionally.
Sorry, I guess that played into your decisions as well. Like, I need something that's more adaptable for my lifestyle, and
I think it was just more that I needed to do something.
Yeah,
I just couldn't be doing nothing. I can't say that if you told 18-year-old that, I wouldn't have believed you, but it turns out actually I do need my mind to be engaged. And it was kind of a blessing in its own way that it gave me that time when I couldn't do anything else. I had to concentrate on what I could do, and that wasn't, because Crohn's attacks your joints as well. I could barely walk, so I needed something I could just do sat down. So I really focused on it, and I think that's when I properly, finally clicked with how to do it. Because it's an odd thing is writing, in that you need the the confidence to sit down and write, but you can only get that through writing. So you're in this weird catch-22, and I don't know any writer that ever feels like they're good enough. You always feel like you've got so much to learn.
Yeah.
And that's the annoying thing with doing anything in the arts, that it's not like my little boy loves maths, which is brilliant because it's wrong or it's right, which must be so comforting. because if you're doing something in the arts, people might like it, they might not, and you don't know. Can't tell until it comes out.
That's very true, but then you do have greats within maths as well. Like if you're really into maths, then you might be aspiring to be like the next giant of mathematics. But yeah, I get that. Like art's much more. I mean, it's everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, only a few people are going to know the name of famous mathematicians, but everyone will know all sorts of different works of art, from authors to shows and producers and actors and writers.
Yeah, and what really works and what is good are not always necessarily the same. So I know writers who I think are brilliant who barely sell any books, and there are writers who I don't get at all who sell huge amounts of books, and there's just no real way of telling. It's marketing is strange and mysterious, and I think that's why the real selling of books happens, as opposed to with writers. We just do stuff and hope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the marketing, like, they know a lot, but it is that sort of, like nobody knows anything. It's a lot of it's guesswork as well, based on experience.
Yeah.
Like we know this sells, that sells, that sells. Oh, that kind of thing we have to sell like this to that market.
Yeah. Well, my first book, it was this kind of fantasy murder mystery, but it was set in a very sort of historical. It was set in 10th century England, really, but I couldn't be bothered doing the actual research, so I made it into a fantasy book. Research is really hard. I don't know too many historians who would pull me up on it, so it's really bad. And it was originally called The Uncrowned Heir, and my publisher was like, "Oh, I don't really like that because technically," and I was like, "Well, yeah, but it's plot specific," and they're like, "Can you think of another title?" And I did. And I wanted to call it All Deaths Well Intentioned, which kind of fit with the mood of the book. And they went, not sure we really like that. And I was like, oh, okay. Do you have an idea of a title? And it turned out what they wanted was something with the word assassin in it. Because there's a certain amount of people who will just buy a book if it has an assassin in it.
Yeah.
And they knew that. So it ended up called Age of Assassins, which has nothing to do with the book at all. I mean, he's nominally an assassin, I suppose, though he doesn't ever do any assassin. But it was just really odd. And I was like, my agent had to say, just don't think about it. Just let them do it. And if the book sells, everything's golden. I was like, all right then. So they did, and it sold. So now I just let them do what they want. I'm just like, yeah, go on and get on with it. I'll just write the inside bit.
I mean, has there been anything like, have you had any fights about anything? Has there been anything where they've gone like, change this, and you've gone like, no, this is vital, I must have it this way?
Well, in the editing of a book, it's not an adversarial process. It's working together to make that book as good as you can. But your editor is after commerciality, and you might be after arty, and it's finding a place in between. But in the end, the editors I've worked with, my final say is the one, and I can put my foot down and say no. And there's always that. But my editor, she understands writing in a way that I don't. She understands it in a very technical way. So I listened to her. Like there was my second book had a prologue, which I loved, and I'd written in this sort of literary motif that echoed throughout the entire book. And when she came back with a comment, she said, you have to take that prologue off. It doesn't work. It makes the reader dislike the main character. And I loved this prologue. And I wrote this 5-page letter explaining to her why I thought she was wrong. And by the time I got to the end of it, I just thought, oh no, actually, she's right. Yeah. Everything she said is right. But in the book with the ships, they use like big crossbows rather than cannons, because Canons are not very fantasy. And I'd like written this 3-page description of how you load and make this crossbow work and then fire it. And she was like, this is way too long. And I was going, no, it's not a naval book unless you have 3 pages of how to fire a cannon. That is just the law of all naval books. And she was like, okay, well, clearly that's your thing. You can have it. And I was like, good. But also when I read through Jenny, my editor, I love her. She's brilliant. She has like 3 levels of Jenny. She'll just say, have you thought? Which means it's just occurred to her as she was going through that I could do this thing and I can ignore it if I want to. And then she'll say, I think you might want to, which means she thinks I could probably make it better, but she's not going to fight me over it.
Yeah.
And then she'll write, we think. And if she writes, we think, that means she's going to be really adamant that I should not be doing that thing.
Yeah.
And usually she's right as well. So, okay. Then. So, and it is kind of, you work together because her job depends on my book selling and me selling more books depends on my book selling. So you're both on the same side. Yeah. And if there are like things that, like for one book, there was a cover which I just had a viscerally negative reaction to. And my agent dealt with that. He just said, right, I will deal with this. Don't mess up your relationship with your publisher.
Yeah.
And that's his job. When things are bad and need done in a kind of more technical way.
Yeah.
Not serious way. I have nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
He will go away and do it. And also at the same time, if I'm being an idiot, because there was another cover that I didn't like, and he just turned around and said, no, it's a really good cover, you're wrong. But I was going, no, you're wrong, RJ, just suck it up. It's a good cover. It's just not the cover you want. And I was like, okay then.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice that you have all these people around that I trust.
Yeah.
And their job is to help me because not only because their job relies on me, but because we all like each other. It's a really nice sort of place to be in. It's really lucky that I'm working with people that I would choose to be around anyway, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're vital as well. I mean, you need that. You need those sort of early eyes on it and that feedback. You need someone that hasn't been as close to it as you have, who's looking at it from the outside and going, that doesn't make sense. And why has that happened? And what's going on here?
My latest book, Gods of the Weirdwood, which is massive. It's a proper, like, old school fantasy book that's as big as a shoe. It's huge. Yeah. My editor's edit letter, she sent back to me and said, these are my comments. And then she just put at the end, we will publish it as it is if this is what you want, but have you considered, because I've written it in first person, which is narrated from the point of view of one person. So I see this and I was doing that or whatever. And she just said, are you sure that first person is the best way to show this world? And you might not be bad pulling out into third person, which allows you to see more of what's going on. And I just thought, no, that's madness. And then overnight I thought about it and then realised that she was right. So I had to rewrite the entire book, more or less. And that's probably the hardest work I've done. But that's because it's worth having that other set of eyes on it, as you said. It's just they see things that you don't.
Yeah.
Because you're really close to it. You can't pull back. And then when you point it out to you, you go, God, I've been so stupid.
Yeah.
How could I have done that?
Yeah. Well, it was too obvious. It was right in front of you, so you couldn't see it. It's like, yeah. There was another thing that I was going to say on that, but I can't remember. It'll come back to me if it's important. So I shall move on to... Let's do Brexit, because I think that'll be quite short. So since we've Brexited, has that changed anything for you? Like, I don't know. You said you mainly sell in the UK, so...
It's made me very angry. It's a ridiculous bit of self-sabotage. It made me a bit sad because I love Europe. I do mostly England, but as well as that, my agent sells foreign rights as well. I'm published in 9 languages. It doesn't necessarily affect me that much because I was meant to go to Germany, but COVID affected me for that because I got COVID and couldn't go, which was really annoying. And the publisher does all of that. They sort it all out for you, and if you need any form of thing, it's all done by the publisher. But I do have to get reciprocal tax forms from the tax office saying that I'm an English national, so I don't pay tax on the continent and then pay again over here. And I don't know what goes on with these forms, but sometimes they're back in a month. But I've got others. I've been waiting nearly a year and a half for another one. And I presume it's something to do with Brexit. But they just take forever. And you can ring up the tax office and they just go, yeah, we'll have that with you next week. And it just never happens.
Yeah.
It's an absolute nightmare. There's no way you can go. So, but that's quite annoying. But I think that's the only real way it's affected me, apart from just making it cross.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's been lots of people saying that it's made them cross. But yeah, like I don't think too many people have mentioned paperwork yet, but I think that's something that's going to come up more and more as we actually move more into it and they start putting on the paperwork.
Yeah, it's just very strange. But I don't think going forward it's ever going to change how it affects me, because it's not like I'm shipping anything anywhere. Postage has gone up because I send off like book plates and things that are signing. I sign them and people can stick them in the books. Postage to Europe has gone up, which is a bit annoying because I used to do it for free and now I'm going to have to charge people, which I don't really want to do. But curse you, Nigel Farage. It's all your fault. If I ever see you, pour a drink over your head.
Yeah, and the BBC for putting them everywhere.
Yeah, what we doing, BBC? You're better than that.
I don't know. So I will let's do, since we're on media, let's do social media, the other social blight. So do you have to do any social media in your work, and the work that you do on social media, do you find that's a good investment of time? Does it boost sales? Do you see a direct result of you post so and then you sell a book, or how what's your working social media experience?
It's changed a lot quite recently since Elon Musk ruined Twitter. Because Twitter was, I'm not sure you really sell a lot of books via social media, apart from the odd, because you see about like Twitter books where somebody suddenly sells 1 million books, not Twitter, TikTok. But I think they're massive outliers. And the majority of the time you don't really sell books through social media. But I would not have got a book deal without Twitter, where Simon Spanton, who was an editor at Clank, saw my short story. So for that reason, like, it got me my book deal, did social media. And I've always used it to be me and just be silly. And I've not changed since selling books. I'm the same as I always was. So I'm not ever using it as a knowing. I'm not trying to sell through it. They will go buy my book quite constantly. But I think you can get away with that when people know you're just being stupid. And you also want them to buy your book. But for books, I think you sell a lot more from people reviewing it on YouTube channels or book blogs, or just talking about it to their friends. And books are weird because still, if you're in bookshops, that's the place to be, really. My books get into bookshops and I'm quite lucky because they have limited space on the shelves, but I would get my books in there and my name's become recognisable enough that, touch wood, they will keep putting them in the bookshops. But I've never really believed that social media sells books. I don't think it sells books to anyone but the people that already like you.
Like to fans of your, because it's reinforcing the brand, isn't it? It's more like an author you like has a new product, like so therefore you get the tweet. I would say that I would guess that sort of national press and kind of arts shows, like if they do a review on Newsnight or whatever, like they'll sell more books than any social media post would.
I think what really sells a book is adverts on the tube.
Yeah.
That's if there's adverts on the tube, you can more or less guarantee that book is going to sell a lot. Or be Richard Osman. If you're Richard Osman, you'll sell a lot of books. If you're famous, you'll sell a lot
being
of books.
on telly, yeah.
But you're being on telly, yeah. So I should have become an actor. I got it wrong. I should become an actor and then written the books.
No, you do Radio 4 shows, then get on telly, and then you'll be flogging books left, right, and centre.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's quite regularly on In Our Time with Melvyn Bragg, so I might ask her if she can get me on with Melvyn. Not that I know much about any of the subjects he does.
I know, but so long as you can answer in an entertaining way.
I can do that, but I'm just not knowledgeable. I'm a jack of all trades. I've got a little bit of knowledge about a lot of things, but none of it of any use whatsoever.
Well, I mean, it is of use.
It's really good for being a writer.
Exactly.
A broad sort of means that you can more or less sell 90% of things. Because if you get the odd thing right, people won't question past that.
Yeah.
And you can do really mad things. Like my ship books, I don't know anything about sailing tall ships. It's incredibly complicated. I love them, fascinated by them. Read loads of books about them, but it's an entirely different language and culture. And I got a lovely email from somebody who did sail tall ships. Shall I say that again? Because my phone just went off.
Oh, that was the phone? Did you get attacked by crows or something?
No. I got this email from a man who was a sailor. And it was a lovely email. He was telling me how much he enjoyed the books. And then he ended it with, and he just said, I just see you do know fuck all about sailing. But it feels like sailing, and that's more important. And I was like, yes, that's what you want. Because it doesn't matter knowing about stuff, as long as it's not terrible and you can sell it. And that's what writing's all about. 90% of books are just this trail of incredibly unlikely coincidences. That if you ever stop and think about it, you just say, that would never happen.
Well, it's whether it feels right, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that whole thing, like they have with sound effects on movies, like Foley effects. They'll use weird things for weird sounds, but that's because that feels right. You know, that feels like the sound it would make, even though that's not the sound it would make at all.
You're hearing what you think things should sound like rather than
and what you expect them to sound like. It's sort of, everyone wants something new, but it has to have an element of how you would expect that newness to be.
And now we expect things to sound like the sound of films when they don't.
Yeah.
It's like, what is it? Tigers and big cats. You see them growling when they attack. All cats hunt in silence. It's just what they do. But we've been... I've been reading about big cats recently, obviously. We've been conditioned that we think they go, wow, and they don't. They're just like, no, I'm surprising you. And also, if you can do a decent run, you'll get away from them because they're really bad at running for any length of time. So become a marathon runner if you want to escape tigers. That's my top tip for today.
Not the biggest threat you'll encounter in the next few years, though, I don't think.
No, though with global warming, who knows?
Okay, so I think that's the next question, isn't it? We've done social media, we've done Brexit. No, not tigers. Climate change.
All right.
I asked this because it's my major obsession is climate change, but also because Leeds has declared a climate emergency. And it's something that's going to affect our work more and more. Like, it's a very warm evening this evening again. So in your work, is there anything you can do or do with regards to adaptation, mitigation or awareness raising around climate change? Or is it not something that is really on your radar?
I do write books that hidden within all the like dragons and stuff. There's actually quite a strong ecological message in there about not messing up your world. Like in the first book, so we being a fantasy writer because people have this image of fantasy as like books for teenage boys, and it's moved past that now. There's quite a lot of really interesting and clever stuff going on. But in that sounds like I'm saying, and especially me, which of course I am. But no, I'm not. In the assassin books, when they use magic, they suck it out the earth and it leaves a dead area where nothing will ever grow. And the magic that they produce from it is black. And I was just so shocked that so many people read these books and no one went, "Oh, you're talking about oil, aren't you? That's what you're talking about." And nobody did, but it was because it was actually an open cast mine that I saw on the moors, and that got me thinking about it. So, yeah, it's a metaphor for oil. But no one picked it up. But there's all, and the Bone Ship books are all about societies that have abused their environment to a point when they can no longer live in it, and they're down to recycling the rubbish that's left. And then when something wonderful turns up, which is this massive sea monster, the first thought they have is, let's kill it. And it's about whether you make that decision or whether you do something else. So yeah, there is an ecological message in everything I do, but there's not much I can do about climate change by being a writer, apart from being quite cross about it, the same way about Brexit, but I don't think anyone's listening to me.
Yeah, it all depends how it's done, doesn't it? Like, I remember, like hearing interviews, and I've heard other people say it, but hearing interviews with like Python and so on, and then they're kind of like, we thought we could change the world through comedy, but, you can't do that.
No.
But there is a level at which they did as well. So there is a level at which, art can be tremendously influential, but you can't really directly say in most cases that, this work of art resulted in this action which changed the world and made everything ideally better rather than worse.
No. I mean, this might annoy people, but I'm a great believer that direct action is probably the best way, and good on the people gluing themselves to the roads, because it makes people pay attention. It might annoy some people, even me, if I get caught in a traffic jam, but I think probably that is the best way at the moment of doing things until politicians start paying attention.
Yeah.
Or I would never say smash up their houses, but they do put black shrouds over them. That was brilliant.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, they put a big black shroud over Rishi Sunak's house.
Nice.
Yeah, just fantastic. Well done. He wasn't pleased.
Oh.
Poor lambkin. Yeah.
Okay, so let's do, how are we doing for time? Let's do the change question. I might circle back to some questions, because if we do this, like if we get through everything quite quick, I might come back to some of the questions.
We can do that.
So I'll do the change question. So I imagine this will be not much to change for you. But yeah, if there were any three things you could change about your work, what would they be? So they can be fantastical, or they can be very, straightforward and basic, but up to you. What would you change?
I'd quite like to, this is going to sound really mercenary, I'd like to sell enough books that you can't buy happiness with money, but you can buy a level of kind of security that allows you not to. And the idea of a starving artist is just because people don't want to pay artists, really. And I would like to earn enough money that I could help other artists, which sounds, I just that'd be brilliant, to be able to go to people, a helping hand to provide somewhere and know I was doing that. I think I don't know if you've heard of Arts Emergency. I support them because there's no risk I can get them. Yeah. I think it's a really important charity. Together with that money, I would be able to have myself an office. And the only reason I want an office is so I can have a whiteboard that I can write stuff on. Because I like the idea of it. And I know in my heart of hearts, I would never use it. Ever. I wouldn't. I don't work like that. I work all in my head. It's like I've got this fancy phone where you can write on the screen with a stylus. I do shopping lists and that's it. I don't ever do it for writing. So in reality, I don't think there's anything I'd want apart from sell more books, which would mean I'd be a bit more secure in writing, because writing's you're only as good as your last book. So the lead up to releasing a book is it's a bit tense, and I could do without that. So I would choose the entirely selfish thing of give me some more money, please, Mr. Publisher.
Yeah. It's that damn precarity.
Yeah.
So that leads us directly into the next question, which is on universal basic income. So if there was a universal basic income, are you familiar with universal basic income? Yeah,
yes,
I thought you would be. So if there was a universal basic income, how do you think that might change things for you? Would it change anything for you? I mean, obviously, I don't think you're going to stop writing because you've got a UBI. No. What impact do you think it might have on you?
I don't think it would have a massive impact. It just give you a little bit more wiggle room.
Could give people more time to read and potentially buy more books.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the idea of a universal basic income, because between about 16 and maybe 22, 23, I did as little work as possible. And was mostly unemployed and playing in bands and having an absolutely great time. And I think I learned the most in my life about the world at that point. And I think every young person should have that opportunity. I think, I don't think you should pay for university. I think we should send as many people as possible to university and it should be covered. But universal basic income would just allow people who were stuck in places of grinding poverty to get some freedom, to do something, and I think that's a wonderful thing, and I think it's an important thing. Just that not having to worry about knowing you can pay your bills is just an amazing thing to have. It's just because when I was really ill, we were really struggling, and the sudden change in my life when I sold the first book, and I didn't get like a massive advance.
But it's still a lump sum that you probably weren't used to having at the time.
More money than I've seen in my entire life. Not a high bar, but just life changing. Yeah. In that suddenly, you weren't running out of money to feed yourself at the end of the month, and you had that cushion, and just amazing. And I think everyone should have that. I don't think anyone should be terrified or living in a position where they don't know how they're going to eat. I mean, we're a rich country, so yeah, I'm massively in favour of it. Not because it would make a lot of difference to me at the moment, but I think it would help other people, and probably my son in his later years when he goes to university or whatever he does, just to have that cushion, knowing that he could actually go to university or not university, or just do whatever, music or computers or whatever, or just nothing.
Yeah.
If that's what you want to do, I don't care. Just not have to worry. Yeah. What a brilliant thing to give people.
Yeah, just have all that free time to invent actual carbon capture that works or something.
Because so much of the worst things in our society are from. Because I'm RJ Barker and I write fantasy as RJ Barker, but I also write crime as RJ Dark, which have. And they're based in not Leeds. Right. Because if you base it in a town, people will get very angry if your geography's not right.
Yeah.
So they're based in not Leeds, but it's a town near Bradford. And it's based in a really rough council estate that is a council estate that existed in my head when I was 13. And those books are all about what poverty does to people and how it forces them into places where they would not go otherwise. And it's generational and it's cruel, and I'll get far angry about that, even than Brexit. So yeah, give everybody money.
I think there's a flip side to that as well with wealth. The story of the kind of desperation that poverty engenders in people in extreme reactions and things like that. I think you see more and more, depending on how conspiratorial you are about the establishment, but there is a lot of, I see a lot of things that say wealth can be quite a bad indicator for your health as well. Like, you know, I think it encourages some terrible behaviors sometimes.
I think it can be quite poisonous not to know how people live. I saw some politician that was on about, oh, we need national service to come back, which bullshit. But I do think that if your parents are old enough to send you to a private school, probably should have to do 2 years working in a factory and living off it. Completely impractical. There's no way it could happen in real life. But I think to go out into the real world and meet people, rich people never generally meet. And suddenly realize, it's not fair to say they don't see people as human, because that's not true. They do. But they don't have a level of empathy, because empathy comes through understanding. And they probably, if you're really rich, you've never met somebody who can't afford to feed themselves after a week. And if in your head you can probably find 100 reasons why it's their own fault, and it almost never is. So it's a difficult, tax rich people loads of money. If I was rich, I would be lobbying to have loads of it taken off me. Because once you've got a huge amount, what's it going to do but get huger? You can't spend it all. Once you've got £1 billion, you can never spend that amount of money. It's mad.
Do you know Pitchfork Economics? It's a podcast.
No.
It's a guy called Nick Hanauser, I think it is. He was a billionaire, made his money off, I think some of it was off Amazon. But yeah, he runs this podcast where he's like, look, we need to start taxing by class, because we're going to have a hell of a lot of social upheaval. And I know what happens when, you know, when everyone gets really, really angry. And I don't want that to happen. I'd rather pay a bit more tax, please. But yeah, he has some really interesting stuff on there. Like, he did a show that was quite amusing where it was like, actually, if you raise the minimum wage and pay people more, things get better. They don't get worse. And that was all just a bunch of lies that they sold to people in, you know, sort of through the early days of neoliberalism.
It's all about liquid money, isn't it? That there are people that take money and they hide it away, and that money does no good. And there are people that take money and spend it, and they're the people you want to have the money. And that's usually people who don't have as much, because they're spending it, and that's how economies work. Though I am not an economist. Don't find my website and send me stuff about it. I'm a writer, and I talk a lot of nonsense. I lie for a living. I make stuff up. I'm really careful about getting on my horse about the stuff, but I don't know. I just want people to be nice to each other.
Yeah. The old, like, what's wrong with a little bit of peace, love, and understanding?
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
So, go on. Sorry, you were going to.
I was going to say, let's move on.
Yeah, I was going to move us on as well before we were too
strident.
Flower power.
Yeah.
So I want to go into some of the books for a bit,
Yes.
because I did have a look at your website, but I only kind of scanned through, and obviously I haven't had time to read the books, and I'm terrible at reading at the moment.
So am I.
Yeah, I need to get back into it. So I think initially my first question is, I mean, to do with sort of where the ideas are coming from. You're obviously fairly prolific. Is it just sort of spewing out everything that you've imbibed through just kind of consuming endless media growing up, or
Pretty much that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's very little thought involved in what I do. It's all very subconscious. I don't plan. I have a kind of, I say I don't plan.
You don't meditate or anything? Or
No.
You don't have any rituals to get into the sort of inspired space?
When I say plan, there are writers that I have friends who plan. They will like have a plan of their book and what is going to happen in each chapter, and that they don't start writing until they've done that. And that's how they go, and then they write a book. Where I sit and I write a book, and I might have usually have a couple of rough ideas about what I want to do, but it all comes out in the writing of the book. And then people say, where do you get your ideas from? Which a lot of writers will complain about that question, but it's a brilliant question. It's just really hard because it's everything. Everything from when you were tiny, it's all in there. And it's really difficult just to say one thing. Like there's the odd thing. Like in the Bone Ships, there's a kind of intelligent avian creature that can control the wind, because that's like a really useful thing for a society that relies on ships. And it wasn't till I was asked to do a podcast about my favourite book, which is Watership Down. And it wasn't until we were talking through that I realised that it was Kihar, the seagull from Watership Down, reincarnated into this book. And as of course, and quite often you only see things much, much later as to what they are. But the disability comes up a lot in my books. In the Assassin books, the main character, Girton, has a clubfoot. And he's looked down on for that. And it was quite fun to play with that. And in the Bone Ships book, the main character was progressively taken apart by war, because he's involved in it, and you get hurt a lot, and he does. And then in the new one, it's again, you kind of recycle your own experiences into stuff, and then you don't realize until later on, because the new book's about a man who can't admit something he needs to admit, so it keeps circling back to the start, and he keeps ending up at where he was at the beginning of the book. And it wasn't until I was doing a podcast about it that I realized that actually I'm talking about how I deal with being chronically ill, which is that I pretend I'm not, until I'm so ill I just have to do something about it. I thought, I've written a book about that. I get it now. Sure. So yeah, it's all very subconscious, and then later on I kind of realised what I might have been doing.
I mean, it all sounds pretty healthy, though, to be honest. I mean, like you sound incredibly relaxed. I don't know if that's you're just trying to keep on a calm sort of. Don't want to disturb anyone else in the house, but you seem to be in just a very steady kind of I detect no stress.
No, it's joyous. I love doing it. There are points that are stressful. Like my health has relapsed massively, and I know that's because you write a book, and you in fantasy they like trilogies, so I write trilogies, and that trilogy is quite well received. Then you do something entirely not. The sensible thing is to do something that's a bit like the last book you did.
Yeah, more of the same, but you want to do something different because you've spent ages in that world, and now you want to be somewhere else. And
my mind does not work like that, so I'll do something entirely different, and then of course you have the run up to that coming out, and you just think, what have I done? Are people going to like this? And for some reason, the first review you see is always the person that doesn't like it. I don't know why or how it works, but it is the way it works.
Because they're the fastest to the press, because they've already got it in their head of I've got all these horrible things to say about them. I just need to put in 5 points about the book, and it looks like I've read it.
Yeah, so that's the only sort of stressful bit, and that can be quite unpleasant. It will kind of. I'm a very laid back person, and I don't really get stressed, but that bit I do struggle a bit with that, and I think everyone I know does. But yeah, I am quite chill. And constantly wake up every morning thinking, I do this for a living. That is amazing. How can this have happened? Because the odds of it are huge. So many people decide they're going to be a writer and just never make it. Or even, and then...
Or do make it and then just can't keep going, can't sell the books, can't...
Yeah, they release a book with a major publisher, and then it doesn't do as well as the publisher wants, so the publisher doesn't come back. And that's really hard. You don't know. And it's not to do with books being good, it's just a really weird lottery. But touch wood, I'm doing all right. So I'm not like a massive author. I'm the mid-list, which is the ones who are earning money for the publisher, but not massive amounts of money.
Yeah, but it's the steady turnover, I mean, go on.
Sorry. No, you carry on.
I was just going to say, I've seen a lot of people kind of complaining about the disappearances of sort of, they would say mid-level budget movies, but what they mean is, things that don't cost $100 million, and the sort of films that, would be a sleeper hit or whatever, the more, not quite indie, but studio produced lower budget films, and you don't see those anymore.
I think that would change. I think
I think that will change
Yeah.
now, and especially with the strikes and so on.
Yeah, and they've been spending, and because TV has become so good that, and I mean, the superhero movies were just television, really. They were just very long television episodes on films. And I think film has kind of lost what it does really well. And I hope it finds it again with really kind of interesting indie movies and lower budget stuff.
Well,
and
that's
westerns. We need more westerns.
Have you written any westerns?
No, but this is a really I have this this idea. The thing about ideas is they're out there, and we're all influenced by the same medium mostly. And I really love the film Predator. I always really liked Predator. And about 10 years ago, I wrote my sort of quick film process for what I'd do if somebody gave me Predator. And have you seen Prey, the newest Predator movie?
Yeah.
More or less exactly what I wrote. It's really weird. It's just, oh, wow. Even to the point where the Native American people you can understand and the other people you can't, which was the big point of the thing I wrote. It's just like, oh, did Hollywood break into my house and read that old notebook? Or is this just a really weird coincidence? Because it happens all the time. It's really interesting. I can't remember how... Oh, westerns. But yeah, I'd love to write a western. I've got a friend that writes like weird westerns. They're really good. She's called Stark Holden, which is a really good name. I'd quite like to... Because the thing about fantasy and science fiction is you can write anything, really, and just kind of put a dragon in it.
Yeah. And like maybe a wrist binding ceremony and, you know.
Yeah. Bit of magic and you're off. Yeah, it's how it works.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do. But yeah, I love a western.
I mean, going back to the ideas thing, I mean, it's all, and this is one of the things. So a show I've been editing at the moment for someone else, and it's come up a lot in their interviews, and it's that thing of, well, you know, oh, so-and-so's stolen my idea, but it's like, it's not stolen if they've done something with it. Oh,
No.
Why is my screen gone off? Oh, it's still recording. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still recording.
Yeah, so like if someone does something with it, you know, then they've got to it first, because other people are going to have that idea, because it's all about just the connections falling into place, isn't it? It's just like two people can make the same kind of connections at the same time, but it's whether someone does something with that.
I think that's the hardest thing for people who aren't doing something like this to understand, is that ideas are cheap and throwaway, and it's all about the execution of them.
Yeah.
And a well-executed bad idea I'll do 1,000 times better than a badly executed good idea. And people just ignore that.
Or an amazing idea that's nothing it's done with.
Yeah, it's really, really odd thing, but it's true. Ideas don't mean anything. We all have loads of them. Throw them away.
Yeah.
Too many, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is amazing how sort of I had this idea at one point where I was going to, because I was kind of like, it's easy to think up various business ideas, but nothing that I actually want to do as a business. So I was like, I could just do a site where you just put a list of like, someone should start this business, someone should start this business, and then people could just pick from there of like, oh, I could do that. Like, that's a good idea for me. Because there's loads of people who are like, I really want to start a business, but I don't know what I want to do. So if you could match that up.
That's it. That's your business.
I just come up with the ideas, man. I'm the ideas man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very open-toed blue sky thinking, isn't it?
It's, I don't speak office speak. I did once, but no, I've long ago left behind the office. I think offices are happier for me not being there as well, to be honest with you.
What was I going to say then? No, it's gone. So I do a little bit at the end where I throw it over to you to kind of discuss anything that you might want to talk about that we haven't touched upon. I can't think of any more questions on the books. It would probably be a good question to ask you sort of either your recommends, like your favourites of what you've done, or a good way into the work. Like if someone was going to start reading your work, where would be a good place to start? And what are the ones that you kind of like or would want people to read, maybe?
Oh, the ones that I always
Is that
want
too hard? Is that...
No, it's not, because the ones that I want people to read are there's a book called A Numbers Game, which is the first adventure of Mal and Jackie, who are my crime novels. And they don't get nearly as much love as my fantasy novels. My fantasy novels do all right. And I love these books with an absolute passion. They're about a chap who's a pretend medium. And he's quite open about this to everyone but his clients. And he's an ex-heroin addict. But he's found this way that he can help people by pretending to be a medium. And he does all the research and he thinks of himself as a bereavement counsellor. And his best friend, who is a Sikh gangster and a borderline psychopath.
What era are we in here?
Now, the set now.
Okay.
And they live on the edge of this really rough estate where they both grew up and had a really hard time. And get themselves into terrible adventures. At A Numbers Game, it is somebody's husband has been killed and they come to Mal, the medium, and he's meant to find this £8 million that their husband apparently had. It turns out it's a lottery ticket, which he can't find. And he knows he can't find that. And like £8 million, that's a large amount of money, physically large. He might be able to find where it's hidden.
Yeah.
But and then it turns out this woman is the daughter-in-law of the area's biggest gangster. And it's his money and he wants it. And then there's some Russian gangsters who don't want him to have it, but they want it. And he's just in the middle of this. And he's just like, I'm terrified of all of you people.
Yeah.
But he's got this friend who's a nutcase. And they gradually get themselves more and more in trouble. And it's funny and joyous. And very Leeds, very northern. So that's what I would say is read A Numbers Game. But the fantasy stuff, I'd probably say read The Bone Ships. It's not a particularly easy book to get into. Sailing books are hard anyway because the whole terminology of sailing is, as I said, like an alien language. But because I didn't want to do the work of learning it all, I made up my own, which was a really bad idea, but I didn't realise until I'd committed to it. Possibly harder than doing the actual work, but often that's how things go with me. So you have to learn all this, but that's the kind of joy of it. And once you're in there, you're in it. And as I said, it won the British Fantasy Society Best Novel Award. And it's a really good book for learning about people. And one of the most interesting, there's a writer called Mark Catley. He's a Leeds writer. He's written for Casualty and EastEnders and lots of stuff. And just before I got signed, I did a writing course with him. And he told me the best thing I've ever heard, which is very obvious looking back at it, but no one has ever put it in words, which is that what makes a character is that the character wants something and they need something. And if what they want is at odds with what they actually need, that makes somebody really interesting. So if somebody thinks they want to be left alone, but what they actually really need is a big hug, you've got an immediate tension created. And that was in the creation of all the people in the Bone Ships. So that's probably... I should actually say read Gods of the Weirdwood because that's just come out and it's in hardback, so I'll get paid a lot better. But
so start there.
Yeah, start with Gods of the Weirdwood. You'll have to wait a year before the next one comes out, and then 2 years before the third one comes out. Because that's
and then you've got these other ones to fill in that time.
Yeah, you've got all these other books to fill in between. But possibly the Bone Ships is closest to my heart of the fantasy books because of the bird creature in it, which is really angry, and I like it because it's really it's properly angry, and it's sort of touches on slavery and colonialism and all this sort of woke stuff that annoys people. And it fills me with joy when they get annoyed. I do a podcast called Write Off Plus with some friends, and every so often we do what's called a 1-star quiz, where we read out 1-star reviews of books and people have to guess what they are.
Yeah.
And some of the 1-star reviews for my books are just hysterical. just to kill me. I love them. They're my favourite ones with people who really hate the books.
Yeah.
They're the best reviews.
You can imagine the vein going in the writer's head on their temple. Right?
Yeah. I always think to a writer friend, there's one of them. That person has clearly created an Amazon account purely to leave my book a bad review because they hated it that much. And I was talking to the writer friend, and he just sat there going, that person thinks that they've scored a point against you, and they don't know it's a badge of honour.
Well, it's all engagement.
Yeah. It is. But yeah, I mean, I think all my books are, it's really weird. It's very hard being very English to say I think my books are good. And I've had to learn to say it. But they are, and it is disrespectful to my editors and the people that work with me for me to say anything else. They're of a level.
Yeah, and your readers. I mean, you're still writing them. People are still buying them.
Yeah, I mean, I have some very creative ideas about grammar, but that's allowed because it's creative writing. And I it's the thing about knowing how to use your tools. You can break them once you know how to use them, but if you don't know you're breaking them, then you're doing it wrong. It's a really
I know what you mean. Yeah,
but it does. I get emails from people sometimes explaining to me why I can't use sentence fragments, and I write back going, "Well, blooming well can you know?" And I do. Sorry, but if you're a grammar pedant, you'll be quite annoyed. So just go in forewarned.
But I mean, I suppose now you've got to get over that. Like I read Seeing and Blindness, and there's like no punctuation in that book. And I know people that have read, like, I know there's a lot of books now where they do like weird stuff with the punctuation, and like, you know, they just kind of don't bother with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's true. It's a thing to play with. It's not. Yeah, I mean, I love Cormac McCarthy for the the stuff he does. It just ignores all the rules. Go away and just write stuff brilliant.
As long as the meaning is conveyed, you know, like that punctuation's there to aid in giving meaning, isn't it?
Yeah, and create rhythm and flow is the thing as a novelist that you're trying to create, rather than, because punctuation is a set of rules invented so that you write in a very certain way and your boss can steal your report and say that they wrote it, because there's no way of telling the difference.
It's not in another style yet.
Yeah. Look. And then once you get into creative writing and you know the rules, you can just break it all, and that's just so much fun. You know, sometimes your editor gets cross, but and you have to meet them halfway.
I've got one final question then for you before I wrap it up. So it's going to be a Star Trek question, because you've done fantasy on boats. And Star Trek is, you know, sci-fi on boats in space. So are you a Trekkie? Like, has that had any influence? Are you just kind of doing Star Trek on boats on the water?
No.
Right.
Because Star Trek borrows a lot from the things that I love. So I'm coming from the same area.
Have you read like Hornblower and all of those as well? Yeah,
I've read Hornblower, and I've read the Cochrane. His name's gone out my head.
Patrick?
No. I can tell you. It's on my Kindle. Hang on a second. There's an English naval officer called Cochrane, who a lot of like Hornblower and Patrick O'Brian based their adventures on. I think it's Alexander Cochrane.
Sounds
Thomas Cochrane.
Right,
Cochrane, and he was a proper lunatic, proper sort of Georgian madman, going and taking massive boats with 22 people in a 3-gun ship and all that sort of stuff. So my stuff's a lot from history that I steal. But I do like Star Trek, particularly loving Strange New Worlds, which I've really been enjoying. But I wouldn't count it as an influence, really. Though I did. The best thing I think Star Trek has done is, have you seen Discovery?
Yeah. Well, first 2 seasons, I think.
Yeah, in the first season there was a space battle, which is one of the best space battles I've ever seen because it wasn't ships coming and doing broadsides. It was proper space in that you didn't know where anything was coming from, and it just looked terrifying. It was done in like 3D, so they were above you and underneath you and all around you rather than side to side.
Yeah, all coming straight on.
Yeah. And I thought that's one of the best bits of sci-fi I've ever seen. That was fantastic. That was really good. But yeah, I like Strange. Have you seen Strange New Worlds? It is lovely.
I watched the first season. I haven't seen season 2. Are they on to the third one now?
No, I don't season 2, which I think is better, but it ends with a massive cliffhanger. So there's that. But yeah, I tend to be drawn more and more towards more based in our world. I think because what I do is writing is so fantastical, and the stuff that I really, really love is all based now or history, but it's real. Like The Bear, my wife's going to be cross with me because she wants to watch the last episode of The Bear. Have you seen The Bear?
I haven't watched any of it. I've heard people going on about it.
Genuinely astounding. To the point that I thought it was entirely ad-libbed. But it's not. It's very tightly scripted. And though, if you've ever been a chef, all my chef friends can't watch it because they say it gives them PTSD. They're just like, no, it's too real. Don't want to go near it. But it's about people, and it really just gets people, and it's lovely. Bear's fantastic.
I read a very good book once called Mediated. I can't remember who the author was, but they talked about that, like, how everything is mediated. Like even when, you can't really experience the Grand Canyon because you have to go through, like a ticket office and barriers and all sorts of fences and information signs and all this kind of stuff. So it's all, everything's got a layer of relationship in it. And he was talking about on TV how every job that you ever see represented on TV are always represented like a TV executive and how they imagine their job is. So everything's the most important thing in the world, and it has to be done right now. And like, you're going to lose everything if you don't do it and you don't get it right and it's not perfect. Like, every job is always that.
It's really weird, I think, for anyone who sees their job on television made into television jobs, because they're all entirely different. There was did you see the Magpie Murders?
No.
Which was a murder mystery set in publishing and an editor who went off and solved the murder mystery.
Oh, what channel was it on?
I think maybe in Channel 4, and it was Leslie Garrett.
Right, okay.
Yeah. That drove me up the wall because I work in publishing, and I know that I was just like, she's an agent, she's not an editor. Editors don't act like that. It's really annoying. and I could barely watch it because of that. It's really odd. And also, I used to work in utilities.
Yep.
So sometimes things will come up on it and it's got stuff about gas and electric supply in it, and it'll really annoy me because I'm like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
No. I know it's for drama, but it's still, I can't do it.
Yeah, but it's also, there's a level of that expectation as well of like, if you told the truth, sometimes people wouldn't believe it because it's like, it doesn't work like that. That's not how I expect it to work.
Did you see, there was the people did Line of Duty, she was in a thing about a bomb squad.
Right.
That was just terrible. Some of the worst television I've ever watched. But they did this thing about blowing up gas meters in a whole street.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, that wouldn't work. That's not how they work. That would do nothing. That's stupid. But one of the weirdest things is breaking believability, which once you've done that, you've lost your audience.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be really careful. That's why it's worth knowing a little bit about everything. As I said, quite a long time ago now.
Yeah. It's keeping it consistent, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, there's an art in knowing how far you can take an audience or your audience with an idea of like, okay, I've bought this much freedom with them. They'll follow me this far into this. So, yeah.
If you've got them by the first couple of chapters in a book, then
they'll go most of the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you do something really stupid. But I think it's why Dan Brown gets away with some of the nonsense he writes towards the end of the books. because he's quite good at presenting us first issue. Mind you, he's really good at dragging readers through it. People slag off Dan Brown, and I wouldn't choose to read it, but he is really good at what he does. Really good. It's really clever. It's just I don't enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, there's got to be something there. Like, I mean, I know most of it's marketing to a large degree, but there's got to be something there as well.
Well, he knows how to drag you through a book. He knows how to make you just
keep turning
one more
the pages.
Chapter. Yeah, just one more chapter. That's what works in a book. Just a bit more. I am going to have to go in a minute.
No worries. I will wrap it up there. So thank you very much for doing this.
I've really enjoyed it. It's been lovely.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you. Thank you again to RJ Barker for being my guest. You can find out more about RJ Barker at rjbarker.com, and you can buy the books from your favourite Leeds bookstores. Thanks as always to all my guests, and thanks to you, Leeds, for being my subject. If you are in Leeds or you are from Leeds, if you are Leeds, then please come on the show. Yes, I am speaking to you. I still need to find 895 loiners to interview, so being a guest is the greatest help. You will enjoy it. 100% satisfaction so far as I know. Remember to like, share, follow and subscribe to Working Hours, and please consider supporting Working Hours financially with either a regular or a one-off donation of any amount. You can email Working Hours at workinghourspod@western-studios.com. Okay, that's me. Work for peace and plan with kindness. Cheers ears, take care out there, and be kind to each other, Leeds. Working Hours is produced, recorded, edited and published by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org. Follow Western Studios Leeds on Facebook at facebook.com/western_studios_Leeds and on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/western-studios. Western Studios Leeds will help you realise your podcast for only £25 for an hour of podcast work. Need podcast production, recording, editing, or any podcast admin doing? Need it all doing? Do you want or need a podcast host or co-host for your podcast project? Then get in touch with Western Studios Leeds Limited. Email makemypodcast@western-studios.com to get your podcast made. I am available to third sector organisations, small to medium-sized businesses and individuals who want to make podcasts or create other digital audio content. Want to make some fundraising case studies? Want to show off your expertise in your field? Want some help creating your show and format, or just some support learning to podcast and getting going? Whatever your podcast needs, get in touch with Western Studios Leeds. Go to western-studios.com and use the contact page to drop me a message about either Working Hours or about your own podcast project.